Who here is already working with a CRM software solution? All right, great. It's actually not as many as I thought. Of those people, how many people like it and think it's really helping the business move forward? Awesome. Okay, that's not unusual. Additionally in here, how many people are interested in thinking about potentially looking at a CRM solution? How many people are exploring? Okay, and of you, how many using it or looking at it are solopreneurs versus an organization? Okay, good mix. Thank you. We'll try to tailor the presentation to talk to all of you. So what's CRM all about? What is customer relationship management all about? And why is it important? Why is it important for us to think about and invest in and spend time on and maybe struggle with challenges to get somewhere? Well, customer relationship management, or CRM, is a system, or it's actually a set of strategies that aim to improve relationships with existing customers, to find and acquire new customer relationships, and win back former customers. The strategies in the system can be brought into effect with software, and the software helps to facilitate the collection, organization, and management of our customer information. We probably already all knew that, but why is that really important? Well, all of us, regardless of our business, we're all in business to serve customers. Without customers, we have no revenue, we have no business. So the quality of relationships that we form and the ways that we manage these relationships directly impacts our revenue. It impacts our profitability. It impacts our business growth. So relationships are really at the center of everything that we do and are really, really critical to manage properly. We all have to orchestrate a very similar dance. Every business has to serve the existing customer base to bring in revenue, right? And at the same time, you have to seek new customer relationships. And usually those may take two different sets of efforts. If you're a solopreneur, it might take different resources within your company and within your organization. The extent to which you can plan and manage these customer interactions and these customer relationships really drives the way that your business will continue to grow and prosper over time. There's many objectives that business leaders seek when they embark on the implementation of customer relationship management and CRM. I've listed them, and for most of us, we're going to say, well, heck, those all apply, or almost all of them apply. I want to share two quick stories with you, a couple of examples. I think they're really great examples of what customer relationship management is all about beyond the software. I talk with dozens, hundreds of people a year when they hear that I specialize in CRM. Many, many times the first question is, oh, that's great. What software do you recommend for me? Have no clue. There's hundreds of CRM applications. Some are very popular, some are not so popular. Most do very similar things. The secret sauce is not in the software. Businesses don't succeed and don't prosper based on software. So a couple of examples. I was working with the president of a Baltimore area manufacturing company. They specialize in defense and aerospace components. They process parts. They process thousands of parts. And the owner said he wanted to implement CRM. He wanted to talk to me about customer relationship management and getting some software in there that worked for him. I said, that's great. I said, why? Tell me what it is that you want to accomplish. And he says, well, I want more sales. I want more revenue. I want more growth. So we've been working on our processes. I've improved processes. We have excess capacity now. I can take on more work. And I'm looking at hiring a salesperson. So I want to get some software in here so I'll know what that salesperson is doing. And I said, that's great. Tell me about the customers that you want to attract, that we want to get. And he sort of went off on some tangents. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. As a first step, let's set up meetings with your top 10 customers. He says, why? I said, I just want to go out and talk to them. I want to learn why they're your customers, what they like about you, maybe what they don't like about you. But that will help guide us in looking forward into how we want to plan for your business growth. So we started setting up meetings and we started going out. And I found that there was great affection. These companies had worked together for many, many years and conducted a lot of business. We started learning a number of other things, though, as we started to ask, how can we serve you better? How can we do more? How can we add value to what you're trying to accomplish? And again, these customers were the manufacturers of parts. My customer processed these parts. And it turns out one of the things we learned was he was only winning about 50% of business in all of these long-term customers. They were giving 50% of their business to other providers. So naturally, ears peaked up there. When we talked about what additional value we could be, how we could serve them better, they all wanted to talk about very similar things, and it all had to do with the processing of their orders, the delivery, the staging of their orders, getting things expedited when they needed to. They were telling stories like, even though I've given you 10,000 parts to process, I really need them 500 parts a week, 500 parts a week. It doesn't do me any good for you to process 10,000 parts and then dump them on my loading dock. And we heard these stories over and over again. So when we started asking, could we accommodate these customer requests? Could we change the ways that we process their parts and their products? We said, certainly, we have this capacity. We've been doing this for 30 years. We know how to do this. So we simply started changing the ways we interacted with the customers. We added a customer service rep to communicate once a week with each one of these customers and talk about the orders that they had open, what was in process, what they needed, were there any changes, and so forth. Simply making these changes, communicating with the customers, sharing information, and talking about how we could be of greater service, how we could deliver greater value. Sales increased 22% in 6 months. No software. We hadn't gotten there yet. All we had done was talk to customers. It was phenomenal. It's not unusual. Had another situation, a data services provider. They provided data sets to very large organizations, very large healthcare systems and pharmaceutical companies. The customers spent a lot of money for this data. They bought a large data set once a year. Same kind of thing. I was working for the CIO of the organization. He brought me in. The objective was to grow revenue. He said, for the last 3 years, no matter what we've done, we're flatlined. It wasn't a huge amount of revenue. It was about $1.4 million, so it wasn't enormous. But he said, everything we're doing, everything we've tried to do isn't impacting our sales. Well, I said, well, tell me what it is that you've been doing. He says, I'll tell you the truth, I'm not sure what they've been doing. I think they email their customers. It was a small division in this large company. He says, I think we need to get some CRM software in place so I can start to track their activity, so I can see what they're doing. I can manage them a little bit better. So I went in and I started working with the team of people, all very bright, wonderful, and they were excited. They were encouraged by the fact that they were going to get this new software that was going to help them. And when we started talking about what are we going to do to increase revenue, are there many more customers out there that you're currently not serving that fit your model, or do we have to serve your existing customers better and more? We started talking about it, and they weren't too sure. They thought they had captured a pretty good chunk of the industry, of the market potential. Certainly there were more out there, but they thought they had a good amount of the potential. So I said, tell you what, how about we talk with your top 10 customers? I've been doing this a lot of years, and that's basically what I offer or what I ask of just about everybody that I work with. So they said, sure. And we started talking with these companies, and they said, the data is very, very helpful, but it turns out they told us a lot about what they had to do with that data once they received it. And in virtually every case, they stripped it down, and even though they were buying very large data sets, they were actually only utilizing a small percentage of that data. And a couple different times a year, they would slice it and dice it and do what they needed to do with the data. It turns out after discussion and dialogue, we learned that internally, before distributing the data set out to them, we could further refine those data sets. If they gave us the criteria, a little bit more specificity with what they were looking for, we could modify that data and give them exactly what they wanted. And interestingly enough, they now started purchasing 3 to 4 times a year rather than once a year. So the frequency of purchase by these top customers went up significantly. They were able to charge more for these services in the same data. They had the same people. Their costs essentially did not rise significantly. The organization doubled sales, went to $2.4 million in 1 year, simply interacting with the customers. This was before we implemented any software. So I share these stories with you to get you thinking that there's much more to customer relationship management. There's much more going on than simply buying software and implementing software and starting to collect data. As you look at this list and start to think about things, it's important to define your business case, your objectives. What are you going after? What are the wins for you? What are you trying to accomplish? And those things need to align very closely with what would deliver greater levels of serviceability and greater levels of satisfaction to your customers. The CRM software that we work with today has its origins dating back to the early to mid-'80s. Software like this started out as contact management software. You may have heard of a program called ACT. I met a gentleman this morning when we were all gathering for breakfast, Dr. Green, and it was interesting. You'd be a perfect commercial here. I should bring you up. Dr. Green talked about many years ago using ACT, and we probably went through every version of ACT. And that's simply managing contacts for people. That advanced to Salesforce automation, right, where we learned that you could have multiple people on a sales team start to track who they're talking to, what they're doing, what deals they're working on. This is enormously valuable to ownership, because if you have a company, if you've ever worked with a sales team, you know it can be very, very difficult to be able to exactly what they're doing. And if you lose somebody, if somebody leaves your organization after a year, as an example, and you have no system in place, you have no records of who they've talked to, of what they've done, of what they've accomplished. So there could be enormous losses. So Salesforce automation really started to kick in, and business owners started to invest in software, seeing a great value return from the investment. This was in probably the mid-'90s. Programs like Sales Logis were very popular for Salesforce automation. Things really kicked up around 2000. There was this little company at the time in California called Salesforce that released products in 2000. I'm sure everybody in this place has heard of Salesforce. They now have millions and millions of users. It's the dominant CRM application. It's phenomenal. The software packages have dozens and dozens, hundreds of features. It can be enormously overwhelming to start to assess CRM software and decide what's the right one for you. What should you pick? Why should you pick it? And what are the ramifications, both short-term ramifications of it fulfilling your needs and long-term requirements. Generally, when we start out with CRM and we implement CRM, we suggest find some wins. You start out with some core functionality that you see displayed up here. Start to get your organization used to working with the data, working with the systems. Today, organizations of any size, the solopreneurs, 1-person, 2-person, 5-person companies, have access to utilizing the same technology that previously had only been afforded by large enterprise organizations. Systems now, $50 a month, $100 a month, things like that, give you access to incredible features and sets of functionality that can be implemented as needed by your organization, whatever is most efficient, whatever is most effective for you. You don't have to use the entire set of features in these software applications. You want to think through things like workflow automations. Again, I'll go back to Dr. Green's example, was talking about his different lines of business, the different patients that they serve, And that for any patient that may come in for one form of treatment, we'll start to receive a series of email correspondence telling them, cross-selling, talking about the other practice areas and other areas of specialty within his firm, right? So simply managing contacts, email, automating your marketing, automating your call center, all of these things help improve the customer experience, your relationship with your customers, and helping you to maximize the longevity of those relationships and the revenue opportunities in those relationships. As I said, typically when you start with more of the core features, and a lot of times when I'm talking to people, they say, I don't want to talk about all this other stuff. Why would I need to spend X amount of dollars on one application when this other thing is so much less money or it's free for me, and I can start to collect and capture the information I need. That's all well and good. Most systems have similar core features, and they'll kind of all work for you in phase one, in stage one coming out of the gate. It's important to think through what you're going to need as your business grows, as your enterprise grows and expands. What you may not need today, you may want to do in a year, or you may want to do in 2 years. You may want to focus on mobile applications so that your people in the field have access to the systems. You may want social media integration. You may be capturing information off of web forms and so forth. It's important to think through these things because it can be extraordinarily expensive and cumbersome to switch CRM systems. Oftentimes you want to start, and people will focus on low cost or ease of use, and they'll get started. And that's fine. That's fine in the beginning, in the early days, in the early stages. But you need to think through where this thing is going to go to. If you end up deciding you have to switch, it may not be the end of the world, but it can be very time consumptive and can be very expensive. Effective planning and preparation, like any major project, is where you'll get the best return on your time and input efforts. Probably the most valuable exercise I would suggest to everybody when contemplating CRM software, whether you're going to implement or whether you're going to improve on, is the strategic customer-centric planning. So what do we mean by that? What am I talking about with that? That is, what is your orientation to your customers within your business, within what you're producing? What is the customer experience that you want to design? This is from the time that maybe you're outsourcing to a digital marketing organization. What is the look and feel of that email? What are they getting from it? How are they introducing to your company? What is your website like? What's that experience like? What's the experience like when they're first contacted by somebody from your company? What's the experience like when they actually decide to buy from you, right? And they're transitioned over to customer support, managing that. Customer-centric planning is also where you really start to break down your revenue goals and objectives. Customer relationship management is about being profitable. It's a strategy to grow your business. If you're like many companies, 80% of your revenue for the next 3 years will come from the people you're already doing business with or you already know. That's Pareto's principle. Okay? Does that apply in your business? When you start to set up your revenue objectives, how much of that revenue can you count on coming from your existing customers? Are you going to need to upsell? Are you going to bring in new product lines? Are you going to add new services to sell more to them? Based on your revenue goals and objectives, how many new customers do you need to obtain? And are you looking for only A customers? Do you look for B customers? Combination of A and Bs? Do you pick up C customers? What's that going to look like? And what are your business processes? What are the procedures that you're going to go through to manage these relationships? And they're generally not going to be the same. You don't do the same things for your existing customers that you do for new prospects, for people that you're looking to win. So you really need to think through that because that really dictates and determines what resources you need to have on hand. What people, what services you may contract with to accomplish these things, okay? Another factor to think about when doing this strategic customer-centric planning is employee experience. Usually, employee experience is a big deal. It's a big issue, but it's not usually thought of, and it's not usually included in CRM planning. I can tell you a quick story. There was a large organization that strategically wanted to roll out a new program. They spent about 18 months developing the program at a cost of about $2 million. They invested about $1 million in marketing. This was a smaller program than they were used to producing, and it was intended to go out to many, many more customers, and started selling. And things worked great. They were meeting the sales objectives. They were bringing in the business, just like clockwork, just according to plan. But there was a problem. The problem was this company was not used to dealing with so many new customers, and they weren't used to dealing with smaller customers. They were used to dealing with fewer, very large customers that had solid resources in place that were very experienced doing what they're doing. Well, all of a sudden, the company is now selling to much smaller groups that don't have these experienced people in place. And as it turns out, they were calling into customer support, and they were calling in at volumes never seen before. There was a team of 24 people in customer support. The problem was these people were not on board. They were not prepared for the influx of activity. They weren't prepared to deal with the people that didn't have experience with their products and needed a lot more hand-holding. So this team of 24 people systematically chose to not provide great customer service. Their customers were problematic for them. The customers were causing trouble. So here you have a situation where an organization invests millions and millions of dollars in rolling out a new program, and it's going very, very well, only to find that they were only keeping a retention rate of about 60%. 40% of these customers were not renewing each year. Well, think of the challenge that presents for the sales team and the marketing people. You have to sell at 140% just to hit your mark. So it's really imperative that everybody in the organization is on board with your customer approach, with your customer philosophy, with your systems of service and support for those customers. So again, going through that exercise of planning your revenue, planning what resources you need to manage the customer experience as you've designed it, could be the most valuable exercise you can undertake. Once you've done that, you want to think about your processes and procedures. I talked about that a minute ago, a little bit. Are they aligned? Are they aligned to give you the types of outcomes that you seek, both for the growth within the existing customer base, as well as for the new client acquisition models? Think a lot about current IT and IS support. What are you using now, aside from CRM software? Do you have an accounting system? Are you collecting information from your website? Do you outsource with marketing firms that are generating leads and collecting leads for you and so forth? Do you have an ERP system or an accounting system that already has customer information in it? And are you going to need to integrate with those? Are you going to need to have those things connected and talking with each other? Finally, the CRM requirements. If you look at these slides and think about what are your objectives, what are some of the features that are most important to you, and then what you've surmised from your customer-centric planning, that will lay the framework. That will define your framework. Okay, thank you. I'm getting my. That will define your framework for your CRM requirements. Okay. In reporting analysis, oftentimes reporting is left till the end, till after things are in place. It's really critical, it's really important to think through what you want out of the systems, what you want to report, how you're going to manage your business, what are the metrics, how are you going to know if you're being successful or if you're not being successful. When it's time for selection and thinking about software, as I mentioned, there's hundreds and hundreds of applications. It can be overwhelming, it can be very difficult to determine which is the right one for you. First and foremost, look for solutions that align with your requirements. Don't look for a solution because it's easy and it's simple. and it's easy to use. That won't do it. It has to align with the requirements as defined on the previous pages. You want to think through what support and development and maintenance requirements are going to need to be in place to keep this thing up and running. In very small operations, for 1-2 people, maybe you'll be the person that manages it. Okay? If you're using core features, if it's fairly simple, you probably don't need to rely on outside resources too heavily. If you do, however, think if there's going to be development, you want to contract and work with experts that have experience with those applications. It's good to put an evaluation team together, if possible, rather than one person. A lot more success when teams review. All these systems have demos available. It's very easy to see demos online. They all make systems available for trials and for pilot testing, so we encourage you to do that. Think through, review the available training tools that are available on websites. The other thing is, as soon as you think you're interested in an application, go right to YouTube. Do search on YouTube. It's amazing the videos that are available for almost every application I've looked at that will train you and show you how to get the most from those applications. And then finally, make sure it's within budgetary alignment. Again, think through a couple years down the road what it's going to take to get a system that's going to work effectively for you and your organization, and be aware of what those costs are. Sometimes systems will get you with a really attractive entry price, only to learn that once you expand and you need to move up to multiple users or something, the price changes dramatically. So it's worth keeping that in mind. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gail.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I promise I won't keep you too long. Data and CRMs isn't the most exciting topic, but it is important. So a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from a gentleman, and the email said, "Good morning, Ms. Robinson. I hear you work with CRMs. Can you recommend one for my client?" And I just stared at it for a few seconds because I wish it was that easy to just tell someone what CRM they could use. But I have 100 questions. What industry are they in? How many contacts do they have? And what do they need this CRM for? We are technical with CRMs. We build CRM systems. So we work with data. CRMs are nothing but a database. So we need information to know how it's going to function properly for your business. So I'm going to cover a few topics that I feel are important for you to carry out here and, to carry out with you and apply. So the first one is planning, and Neil spoke on a few of these things. Planning is imperative when you are taking on a CRM system. You want to get people on board early to create user adoption, because there's nothing like investing in this tool and not having your team on board. So get them in early, get them involved, find out what their pain points are, and please assign an administrator, because you're going to have 1 or 2 users who are not going to be excited about technology. And the priority is getting data into your system. So that means even if you give that one user who doesn't want to, just dead set against not entering or using your CRM, you want to have that administrator as backup to maybe enter information in an Excel spreadsheet. Have an import template always on hand so you can enter that information and maybe do a weekly import. So that'll help with getting that data into your system. Another thing with planning is in user adoption, also permission and user roles. You want to make sure you don't want your team looking at information your executives should have access to, like your reports or sales. So everyone shouldn't have their hands in the pot. So that's something to think about also. You don't want your team members looking at the executive dashboard. As far as integrations, Neil brought up a great point. You want to think about what type of system you're going to get that's going to integrate with your email, with your accounting, with your email marketing. Those are popular ones we are always asked about. And you also want to make sure you get the right edition CRM. I know with Salesforce, if you plan on integrating it with more legacy systems, then you're going to need at least an enterprise edition to do that. So that's something to think about. Also with data, which is my favorite part. You want your data in a centralized location. That means get it out of MailChimp, get it out of your Gmail or Outlook contacts. Get as much as possible in your CRM. Not only do you want all of your data in your CRM, but you want to segment it because you want to make sure the right customers are getting the right messaging. So that may be your A clients versus your B clients. That may be your strong leads versus leads that are not so strong. But you want to make sure they are tagged properly. Where did these leads come from? So that way you can provide yourself better reporting. And you may see a handout in front of you from me, which will help you plan your data because it's so important before planning it. It'll help you map out also to give you your analytics from your CRM. So say for instance, I had a client who wanted a report on closed accounts for the month of January, but he didn't have a closed field in his record to give him that information. So those are just some things to think about. You want to sit down and really think about how you want to build and customize your CRM to fit your business. Another thing to protect your data in your CRM system is creating as many drop-down fields, required fields, so your users aren't just going in and typing anything. You want to try to limit your text fields so they can't put in abbreviated information. Let's say you want to make sure an email field is required, so a record can't be saved unless that email address is in there. Let's see, and of course, reports. Reporting, that is another thing. So reporting ties into your data. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure you have the proper data, that it's clean, because that clean data is going to give you accurate reporting. So let's say you want a pipeline report or maybe open close reports. Your data reflects that. So that also ties into your end users and their permissions and how those fields and everything tie in. And one last thing I would like to touch on is training for your CRM. Everyone learns differently. You may have some who learn best by watching videos, some who learn by having one-on-one hands-on training, and some who like to read. I like to read, so give me a manual and let me go through it. Let me go through the screenshots, and then I'll apply it later. But find out how your team or the end users learn, especially the administrator, because that's the most important person in your organization who will be that go-to person and own the data. If you cannot have someone in-house be in charge of the data, there are always outsourcing that you can take advantage of. Another important thing is if you're going to work with a consultant in implementing your CRM, make sure they care about your business and ask you about your goals. Not just someone who's going to recommend a system because they are partnered with the company. They need to know your goals, your end goals, what you want out of that CRM. If you have processes in place, and nothing should begin in building a CRM until you have those processes in place, because automation and workflows cannot take place if there are no processes. One thing that will be helpful also in building your CRM is automation. I've set up some sequences for a client where he's so busy working on projects, he doesn't have time to reach out to his prospects. So we set up sequences where they're touched once every other week, and they send out flyers, and it's on autopilot, and that has been a tremendous help to him. So think about in your planning how you want to automate your CRM, your workflows, who you want to touch and how you want to touch them. Any questions? Yes.
What are your favorite CRMs?
Oh, My favorite CRMs are the ones that people use every day. So most CRMs are similar. I mean, they have the same functionality, just different interfaces, but they basically do the same thing. So if you're using it, I would say start out with the basic use, entering your contacts, making sure they're segmented, and making sure there's some follow-up in place. Another important thing, because this will save time, is making sure it's integrated with your email. Starting out with the basics, because the CRM can be overwhelming. There's so much to it, but ride it with the training wheels on for a little while, and then once you get comfortable, take them off and then advance to more involved features. Come on, Neil. Any other questions? Yes.
Most salespeople hate CRM. I can't get them to spend the time, put anything in. What's one thing I can do to get them to actually use it? Oh, this is great, but they don't use it.
Exactly. So I would say meet with them. If you are going to implement it, bring them in from the very beginning. That's so important because they feel like they're involved when they have input. And I had a company who brought in a system a year ago, and now we're here a year later implementing a new system because they just brought it in, no one knew about it, they rolled it out, and everyone began to use it, and they hate it. So I went around and had a 15-minute phone call interview with each user just to find out, and they were simple requests they wanted, simple things they wanted in the CRM. We had a rollout meeting, and now everyone's on board. Not only getting them on board early, but some may not have the confidence or the training to use it comfortably, or maybe having that admin to stay on top of them. If you're lucky, you may have just one. If you're unlucky, you may have 2 or 3, but hopefully it's not too many. But I would say try to get an admin, because the most important thing is getting that data in, and if they won't do it, then maybe that admin can stay on top of them to help them.
If I can add to that. Or go work somewhere else. And sometimes that's the right answer, to tell you the truth. Again, CRM is strategic. And in terms of red flags to watch for, if there's lack of executive sponsorship, or if the implementation is not tied to the executive requirements. What are executive requirements? This is what I expect from my company. You're working, these are your job responsibilities. It's really not optional, especially for a sales team, to not comply.
But what if the executive doesn't do it?
Chances are you'll have a failed implementation and likely a failed organization.
And get an admin.